Hello and welcome to the third part of the objects and classes tutorials. The last one was the framework part 1, so this is the third part of all of them. Now what we're going to do in this one is we're going to continue on with our framework that we're making, just to basically say where we left off. We basically left off with finishing up, or not finishing up, but just really putting some functionality into our MySQL adapter. Now this MySQL adapter is really not going to be the main class that we're going to be using. It's just going to provide some core functionality to the next class, which we're going to be using as still not the main class. Alright, now the next one that we're going to make is called the model class. Now if you know anything about MVC, that's Model View Controller. Okay, this is a new method. It's not brand new, but it's just one of the methods which people now decide to use for business logic. So if you don't know anything about using a model, then let's continue on and we'll make this model, and later on you'll start to see and understand how this comes into play and how we can basically reap the benefits of it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come to our main project itself, and now basically place in within inside of our database a new class. Okay, and this class is going to be, like I said, called model. Alright, and as before, let's junk all this. Let's come to our database one, just to actually our MySQL one, and let's just copy this and back to our model, chuck that in there, and then we'll just change that to MySQL because we need this. Change this, change this to model. Now this is going to extend our MySQL adapter, alright, because we want all the functionality of that. And now what we also need then is to call the constructor of this as well, which is just there, nice and simple. Okay, so now that's what we're calling here is our MySQL adapter class. Alright. Okay, next thing that we're going to do with inside of this is, because the model already now has a database already provided to it through the actual through the database with the connection and so on. Now, so potentially the logic has got the database in it, but realistically speaking, what we're going to do is have the controller and so, well, yeah, it's kind of a little bit difficult to explain for the time being, but what we need to do is allow the MySQL adapter to basically connect as well. So we need to go all the way through to the actual database itself. Now within inside your main framework, we're going to have to connect this database through another method, alright, which we're just going to do in the beginning. We're going to do through our logic, which we have done already, as you can see within inside of here. This isn't going to be a great place potentially to place it. You would call this somewhere else, but for the time being we're going to leave it within inside of the logic itself. Alright, okay, so the one thing, now that we've got the model here, realistically speaking, what I'd like to do is now go to the logic itself, and what we're going to make here is and is connected through the logic itself. Alright, now we're going to make a static function here, just to say is connected. Okay, let's just move this down a little bit. Whoops. Okay, now we're going to come here and we're going to go within inside of our database itself, and then we're going to come to say this here is connected there. Right, so it's nice and simple. So realistically speaking, all we're going to do is we're going to return and say this DB is connected. Okay, because that there, oh, it's private. Now we've actually got, we need to access this from here. So public function, and let's just come here and copy this and place it in the database here. Let's zoom into that. If this, and we don't need that because we're accessing it directly. If this connected, then return true, else false. Now we could just return this connected, would be also a possibility. So we can save that. Now come back to our logic itself, and now what we're going to do is basically say return this database is connected. Now we have one issue with this, alright, is that we're making this a static class, which means we're going to access it like this. Okay, we're not going to instantiate the class, and we're going to say is connected. If I write it out in full for you, just like that, we're going to write it like this. Now this means that we can't use the this word basically, because that's it can't call a property of the instance of the object of the class with inside a static element. So we're going to have to find a way around of basically saying whether the database has been connected or not. So realistically speaking, whilst thinking about it now, because I'm actually doing this all on the fly, right, I'm trying not to plan it too much, because I want to show you how we can do this just by thinking logically and going along and building it. Alright, now if I did plan it already, then it would basically mean that I'm just copying code, and that's not what I want to do. I want to show you how you think about the logic of actually programming itself as well, because that's, if you can't do this, then there's no point doing it. Okay, so let's have another think about this. Let's think about an easier way that we can do this. So realistically speaking, what we want to do is we want to extend logic. Okay, now because logic itself is going to connect already by when we call the constructor. So let's come over to logic, and we don't have to have here anything called within that. See, I'm actually now modifying what I said a minute ago. Alright, so that's now calling extending logic. Now all we want to do in here now is come here and actually require logic here itself. Alright, now what does this mean? This is far easier, because now that we're extending logic, we don't have to worry about the database itself, because the database is going to be connected in here. Now this is also going to give us all the functionality that we need with this database. Now what we could do in this is then kind of adapt the database functionality, but we're not going to do that, because that's kind of also confusing matters once again. I know I've just spent the first 8 minutes kind of making a bit confused, alright? But I planned it one way, now I've just decided to change it to another way. Okay, right, let's move on. Now we have the model class, which is extending the logic. The logic has already got a connection to a database in that, which then also will have, through the logic, the MySQL adapter. The MySQL adapter then is extended from the database. So we've got all of this functionality through the MySQL adapter, which comes through the logic, which is then in the model. Okay, well, which seems to be nice and simple to me. Right, so now with inside the model, what we're going to do is just going to save this, come to save our logic, and we're going to get rid of this is connected once again, because we actually don't need that. Come to our MySQL, and that's not there, and come and remove anything that we've just done already. If you had put that in yourself, then you can just go and delete it here. So let's save the logic. Now we can come to the index.php. Now we don't have to have a new logic here, so let's just dump all this for now, and what we need to have is our model. So let's require, if I can type it properly, require once, and we are then going to our MySQL, which would then be, let's go to here and get it instead because it's far quicker. libroot database, and we want model. Okay, so let's say model equals new, come on David, new model. Alright, and once again let's just show you what's inside of the actual model itself, and just to show you the inheritance of what we've actually picked up. Okay, let's come over to Firefox and come to here, and let's see what we got. Failed is connected, yeah. Okay, forgot to remove that, which is on logic. Which was on logic here, is connected. Line 6. Oh yeah, there we go. Forgot to remove that as well. Let's come back again. Okay, now as you can see, we've got the model, has a database, and has all of the relevant information that we had. Is connected to the actual MySQL database itself, and then has, yeah, is connected there, and the actual database itself is open. Alright, so we've got all the functionality that we need, which is good. So within inside of our model now, we need to basically use this model as a point which we can then extend onto another profile itself. Now, like we said, we was going to make a user's data. Well, we have made the user's database, so which means we need some form of way of extracting that data. So let's come into our classes, and we're going to take this out and copy that. Now come into our classes. Now within inside of here, we're basically going to make a folder saying MVC. Alright, and inside of here we're now going to make another class, and once again we're going to call this user model. Okay, and now save, and we're just going to come back here again because I want to put this to lowercase. Okay, now we come to our user model, and we put that in there, and then we're going to come and steal this from here and place that in here. Okay, so now we've got our model. Now our user model needs to extend model itself, which we've done fine. Let's get rid of this code here. Now we need to call the constructor of the model itself, so then we get all the functionality. That calls its parent constructor, then that calls the parent constructor, and we get all of the functionality once again. Let's come back to our main page. Now let's make another define, shall we? Let's come in here and say define, and we'll say MVC, and now we'll make the home directory of this basically going to be then root, and then classes, directory separator, and then MVC. So that's now, and then put a directory separator in there. So now we've got the MVC itself. So let's come to our model here, and we've required the logic from that, and then we come to our this one here, we've required that's fine. User model. Now we come to our index.php, and what we want to do now is to say require once and MVC, and then all we want is user model.php. Alright, don't worry about it too much for now. Okay, we're just going to say user model here. Come back to Firefox. Come back to Firefox and see what we got now. Okay, as you can see now, we've got user model, which has got all the functionality now of the database which we gave it, alright, which is good. Now if we come now to our model here, and we'll just add a public property of, say, test prop equals just true for the time being. Come back to Firefox. So we've got this now in the model, alright? Now we've obviously required in the index the user model itself. So let's come back over to Firefox, come here, and as you can see now we've got test prop, which we received all the way from the user model. Now just to show you inheritance even further, let's go to the model and we've got logic. Let's come over to logic. Now let's make another one up here. These are all just for testing. Okay, so test logic equals true. Come back to Firefox. And as you can see now, we've got that from test logic as well. So that's what I'm talking about now with inheritance. And if we come back to our index.php, and what we do is we just echo model, and if we let it load, you see now we've got test logic and test prop, so we can use all of this information from here. Now what I'm going to show you is our get function, right, which we made, and how this one works. So the logic itself then had test logic, alright? So come to index.php, place that in there. Let's change inside of the logic, and let's change this to some information, alright? And quite literally, let's put some information in it. And let's place that in there. Okay, so now we're just got some information there. Come back over to index.php and we're going to echo this out. And as you can see, let's put a break on it just so you can see this. Nice and simple, echo get test logic. Now like I said, the test logic, and there we go. Okay, as I said, the get function gets a property within inside of the object. Okay, now this property came from logic, alright, and it's been passed all the way down, all the way to user model, and that's why our within inside of logic itself we used get and said the first thing is it a property of this. Okay, now this can be the complete class, including all of its parents classes and superclasses and so on, all the way up to the main core one, which in this case would be logic. Alright, so that's basically how it's working. Okay, so we can get rid of that and we can come back to logic itself and remove this one once again and save that, come back to model and get rid of this one once again because we just don't need it. So our user model. Now what is it that we want from the user model? Well, we want to be able to get data from the database really easily. So what we're going to have is we're going to have functions that are relevant to the actual database itself. Now in theory we want to get a single user, we want to get multiple users, alright, just in the beginning. So what we're going to say is we're going to say get user, and now we're going to say ID in there, alright, because we're going to get them by the ID of the primary key of the database itself. Okay, so now what we also want to have then, if we've got just get user, we want to have get users. Okay, and we don't need any ID in that. Now at the moment these don't do anything because obviously there's no code inside of it. So we already know the name of the database or the table, so realistically speaking, right, all we've got to do now is use a query. Now we've got the database from model, which the model takes that from the logic itself. The logic gets it from the MySQL adapter, and the MySQL adapter gets it from the actual database class itself. So we can just say here set query, and we just say in here select everything from users where ID equals ID. Nice and simple. That's set the query, and now we're just going to say if this db, let's go back to my MySQL because I can't remember whether num_rows has tested it. If this resource and this row, okay, so we need to actually check this resource, get row, if that's set query, this resource is there. Okay, good, so we can do that because the resource has been set to it already, which is fine. Okay, so if this db num rows is equal to 1, because we're only getting one user, then we're going to return this db get row, which I believe that should be correct. Yeah, get row, there it is. Right, else, if it fails, then we're just going to return false. Okay, so let's go over to the front end of it, and let's now come to here, and we'll say model, and then get user. Well, we've got one in there, so it's more than likely going to be ID1, and let's see how many errors we get. And obviously we get nothing. Let's just check the database, shall we? Possibly I've done something wrong there. More than likely done something wrong because it isn't working. Select everything from users where ID. Oh yeah, look at that. Right, there we go. So just change the ID there to the capitals because that's how it actually was. Still not working. And the name of the table is users, where ID equals 1. Okay, well let's see whether it's actually getting here. No, okay, so select everything from users where ID equals ID. Okay, then there must be the number of rows. I've got this wrong, so this resource, set query is going there. If this query, this resource is equal to that, so that should have, let's just say query good. Query is good. Alright, so we've got this resource, it saved that, which is fine. Now we're saying num rows, and this row, okay. So that's where this is wrong at the moment. We don't want this row. So there we go, we got the user there. Alright, so let's just delete any text that we've just put in that we didn't need. Right, see, it's always good just to do a bit of testing all the time. Let's remove that once again. Come down here, remove that. Everything else, it didn't add anything more. And there we go. So now we've got the user. Now I believe we put 2 users in. Okay, as you can see we've got 1 and 2. Now we've got, within inside of our user profile, we've got get users. So let's say now this db set query, select everything from users, order by ID ascending, and obviously ID once again is in capitals. Okay, and then we say if this db num rows is more than 0, then return this db get rows. Okay, else return false. Alright, so nice and simple. You see how much we've shortened our code. If we was to do this before, we'd then have to loop rounds with our while loop and so on, but we've got a nice, quick and simple piece of code. And especially on the front end, we've got it's even easier to use. We've just got get users here. So let's come back to here. We should now undefined property num rows. User model. Did I just type that in wrong again? actually it's a function. There we go. So now we've got 2 users listed, okay, in an array. Now inside this we've got 2 standard classes. Now at the moment I don't want to work with standard classes, I want to work with user info classes. Alright? Now I'm going to show you how we're going to do this in a minute. At the moment this is just a user model, alright, nothing more than that. But something I don't want to type in is get, alright. I just want to type in user and users when I'm actually going to try and find it. So let's go over to our model and let's add some functionality here, shall we? So we've got the get within inside of our logic. Right, well that seems pretty logical. So what about we check first of all within inside of our logic, come in here, and what we're going to do first of all is just do a quick test, and we're going to say if class exists, alright, and we're going to say property, alright, and in here we're going to say uppercase first, just in case, and then before this we're going to add a get to it, alright. So if this class exists, then what we want to have is return new, and let's actually first of all say class name equals get, and then uppercase first property, alright. Now just basically because we're calling the function itself. Now the unfortunate thing is inside of the get user we need to pass a parameter to it as well. Now we can fix that shortly. So what we want to return then is this, and then class, actually we want to return this get, this model, and so on. Yeah, that's right. I want to just return this class name and just turn it into a function. Okay. So let's now come to the model itself, which we've got the user model. So rather than saying get users, we're actually just going to say get users like this, right? And see whether that works, and see whether we need to put anything else. It's not getting anything. All right. Oh, it's because we haven't saved that. No. Okay. So let's come back to our logic. If class exists, what am I talking about? What are we talking about? Is if we need to come to when it comes to PHP.net, all right, and function exists, and I just want to check func exists. Just something that function exists, and it's the string. Checks the list of denied built. Yeah, okay, function name. Okay, so that's what we got wrong here. Function exists. Yeah, that's right. Did I spell it wrong then? Oh, I put a space there. There we go. If function exists. Now let's come back to here. And we didn't get that either. Uppercase first. Get user. Let's see whether we're actually getting anything out of this. No. Now that's within inside the logic itself. This class. I'm just going to pause it a second. Okay, very simple, very simple indeed. Just because we're thinking about classes, all right. We just simply need to use the method exist, which takes 2 arguments, one being the object itself, then the string method name. Alright, so let's come back over to here, and all we got to do is change this function here to method. Okay, now we need to add the first parameter, the first attribute now of this, because we're testing this. We added the get in, come here to class name, add that add the little get onto it, uppercase the first as well, and then return this function. Alright, come back to our index.php, we're still doing it correctly here. Come now back to here, refresh it, and everything's working fine. Alright, so that's nice and simple, which means now that we can have we can just use the get method now with our methods within inside of that class itself, and if it doesn't exist, then obviously nothing's going to happen. Alright, which is good, which is fine. Now the only thing that we have to worry about now with the user model itself is the ID. Now what happens if basically we want to have a parameter with inside of the ID, which isn't really going to work, is it? Well, you've either got two scenarios here. You use the actual the functionality of just using the get user function itself. Otherwise, well, I'm going to simmer on that, and I'm going to think about how we can adapt this code there. But for the time being, it's okay. We can use it either way. So now we have the user's information. So let's come over to our projects and let's make the user info class itself. Now, with inside of our classes, I want to have a users folder, okay? Because that's of relevance. Now, in this one, we're going to keep it uppercase, and we're going to add a PHP class to this, and we're going to call this users. And once again, we're going to remove all this trash here. Remove that like that, and we're going to extend user. No, actually, we're going to just extend logic for now, I believe. Yes, and let's yeah. You're going to have user info, which extends logic. All right. So let's come to here, and let's copy this just to save time. Save that. Come back to here. Put that now. Didn't copy this. Copy that. Okay. Basically, what we're going to do with this. Let me just do this first. So let's go to user model there. Libroot. No, that was wrong. Our index. We want to have this there. Put that in there instead. User model and MVC. Well, let's just go to root, and also then we want to have classes. Was that capital? No. Classes, and then we want to have users, and then directory separator, and then users.php. Okay, so that's all. No, we don't want to have that. We want to have, I'm being stupid again, aren't I? We just need to have logic there. That's it. That's it. Okay, so now we're extending that. We're extending user info to the logic. All right. Quick thing that we need, obviously, to get all the functionality from the logic now is then the constructor itself, which we want that one there, which is good. Okay, with inside of the user info, all we're simply going to do is copy the database. Pretty much, that's it. So we're going to make lots of public properties, and we're just going to say ID equals null. Public was, I believe, first name equals null. Public surname equals null. Let's come to here quickly and see what else we had. Okay, so it's name, surname, email, equals null. Let me just pause the video and I'll do. Okay, now that you can see that I've got all of the properties with inside of the database itself. Now, with inside of the user info, what we pretty much want to do is just go through all of the data itself that's come from the database, right, and just put it into a class itself, right, like this one. So potentially speaking, the information within inside name is going to be placed within inside of this function, and then it's going to be added into this, so which means then we get all the functionality from logic and we can access it with a little bit more clarity, okay, and we're not going to get as many error messages and so on. Now, how we're going to do this needs a little bit of logic behind it in order to do this. Okay, so I just need a drink. Okay, right. Now, the question is when and how do we want to do this? Well, what I want to have is a user class itself as well. So this user info, realistically speaking, isn't actually going to do much. All right. It's just going to loop around the relevant information. Now, really, we want to have a user. Actually, sorry, we want to change the name of this to user info, okay, because that's the name of the class itself, and it's more just like a kind of doing. It's like a kind of a helper class rather. Okay, now let's come to here and actually add then a users, or a users class here with inside users. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm pretty much just going to copy this, so we don't have to. Oops, didn't want to do that. I'm just going to copy all of it and stick it all there. Now we don't need any of this, right? Because we're going to have it within inside of our user info itself. Okay, right, so within inside of our users class itself, this is going to be a static class, all right? Basically, because our user info is going to do all of the let me have a think about this. Okay, had a quick think, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to use the user model itself with the user info, with inside of our user model. All right. Now, let's just come back to here. Sorry. So require once in here. Now we're going to require now the root. All right. And from the root we're going to classes, and then we're also going to the directory separator and users, and direct here, and then user info like that .php. Okay, because we need to have the functionality of this. Now we're going to instantiate a lot of these user infos. Okay. Now what we need to do inside of here is we're going to pass in there the user, just move this for you, the user data. Alright, so as we collect the row from the database, this is what's going to be passed in, is the row from the database. Now very simple, is we're just going to say if is an object first of all, is user data, because we're retrieving a standard class or object from the database, so we're checking if it is an object, else we're going to return false here. Alright, now for all of the data with inside user data, so for each user data as key and value, we're basically going to say, didn't do that. Okay, if this gets, and we're going to go in here and say, oh no, we want to have key. Okay, because each part of the of the row is obviously going to have a key and a value as well. Alright, now for the time being, let's do this, shall we? Let's just print R on this, just so you can see each value is going to have, let me think about this quickly. The user data is going to be a row with inside of it, and each key, we can come over to the main page at the moment, as you can see each key there. Yes, that's going to work fine. Alright, so let's, potentially speaking, this is going to be right. As we put a single user info, we're only ever going to put a single user in, so this user data is going to be the standard class itself, and the key will be then the actual column name, and the value will be the value of that actual cell itself. Okay, so this works fine. Okay, so let's just go, this gets key, actually yeah, if this get key, so we're basically testing if this key is one of these, which it should be, then this key equals value. Alright, so we're going to set it, and else, just if it's not, we're just going to do a test anyway, and if it's not, guess what, we're going to set it anyway. Alright, oops, don't want that there, but I just like to do the test because maybe later on we want to add something else in here. Alright, now basically because we're getting a new user info, well, once that's in there, it means that this object itself has now been updated with the user info, which is good. Alright, and we've got some functionality now of logic. Now, with inside of our users itself, why do I keep doing that? Let's save this one here. Come to users. Now, with inside of our users itself, we now need to know that our logic has been used properly. So, with inside of our get user, right, what we're going to do is we're going to say, whoops, we're going to say return, because we've got the user info here, alright, return new user info, and we're going to push the row into it as well. Alright, so let's come back over to our index.php. Let's get rid of this for now, just so we can use the get user, and we're just going to go 1, and we're going to see whether it works. Now, as you can see here, look at the difference in this now. Alright, now that we've got all of the information within inside of our user info, and also we've got a database as well still connected, just in case we want to do any additional work, and now this has all functionality. Right, so it's the same piece of data. All we've done is we've transferred it into a more a better class. All right, we had a standard class before which had no methods in it, had no other properties in it. Now we have a user info which is strong and easy to use. Okay, so it means that we're writing less code. And remember, we actually haven't written that much code really in the user info. Okay, and in the user model, we've written really next to no code. Yeah, we would have written this function anyway. We would have written this one to select the data, and pretty much we just wouldn't have written this. But when it comes to our view class itself, this is where it's really going to make a difference to reducing the amount of code, and it's going to look and feel a lot less confusing, which is the place where you're always going to be changing things around. Your view needs to be very logical and easy to understand, because this is where the most confusion comes with inside of your view. Okay, if you're having to always do any functionality in there, you should never have to do any functionality in the main view where you're outputting data. It should always happen with inside of your business logic itself. Alright, so now all we've got to do is update our model to say the get users. All right. Now, as we retrieve the get rows, we've basically got that now as an array. Okay, going back to our MySQL, as you can see here, we then had it then into rows, which is an array, yeah. So let's go back to our user, our user gets, well, we get rows, yeah, get rows. All we're going to do now is we're going to make a simple another array here, all right. But this time, what we're going to do is we're going to go for each this dot get rows. All right, so we're still going to get it as key and user. All right. Now, inside of this, we're going to say users, and we're going to give it the value and then the ID itself as the main index, all right, which is going to be nicer, equals new user info, and we're going to say value, all right, because remember this is rows and the key is going to be the actual just the key of the index itself. I don't need that. The key of the index of the array anyway, because we didn't actually set anything with inside of our MySQL here. We just used the standard indexes. All right. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, give me the user, which wants to go there instead. Sorry, and that wants to go there. The user is actually the standard class which has come from the database. We're going to push it into the user info, which is going to return the actual class itself into this here. So now all we're going to return now is users, all right, which is going to be an array. So we can close that down there. Come to here, remove this, remove that, come to users, and see what we get. User model users. Okay, one second, where are we at on model? Get users. Oh yeah, get users. Okay, as you can see now, we've still got the exact same thing has happened, but this time it's put the index there. All right. Normally that would say 0 and 1, but now it means that if we need to reference, let's just say get users, all right, and say it's users here equals model get users. And now place in here, because this is now an array, okay, users, and we'll say index of 1, all right, come back to here, and as you can see we're just spitting out the index of 1, which is then the ID here. So it means that we can access it a hell of a lot quicker. Now let's think about this even more. Is what about if we've already gone through get users and we don't want to have to come to do another database call for a user once again? It seems crazy. If we've already got the user out here and put it in here somewhere, why would we then want to spend the extra milliseconds searching the database for the user once again when we've already actually got it in memory? Although once we get down to here, we actually lose it in memory because it's returned it. So why don't we keep it in memory to save time? Now how can we do this? So within the last 11 minutes we're going to go through this, and we're always going to go back now to by reference. Okay, so we're going to save it by reference. Okay, so within our user model, all we're going to do is we're going to say private, okay, static, is because we're going to keep it static, okay, and it's going to be users equals null. Alright, now on an instantiation of the class itself, we're going to say, actually no, we're not going to do it there, sorry. On the get users, so as we go along, because this user ID is going to be put into this users here, right, we're going to abolish this in a minute. So if array key exists, right, now our array key that we're going to be using, or an array, is up here, alright. So now the only thing that we've got to do is, realistically speaking, is up here on instantiation of the user model, we need to check is an array, okay, whoops, is an array, and we say self users, okay. Actually we're going to say if it's not an array, because then we need to initiate it, and we'll say self users equals array, nothing more than that. Otherwise then it is already an array and we're going to leave it, alright, we're not going to do anything to it, because if we come to array key exists and users isn't actually an array already, then it can then cause an error. So array key exists, and let's just check that again, needle haystack, yeah, the key and array, yeah, okay, so that's the haystack itself, and then all we're checking here, okay, is user and then ID, alright. So let's come to here like that. So if the array key exists within inside of users, we can get rid of that, that's not needed, then we know that it's already in there. So what we want to do is if the array key exists, then if it not exist actually, then we're going to update it, alright. So self users equals, and in here we can say user ID, alright, equals then this one here, alright, new user. Now for us to put this now by reference, okay, we can't put by reference for a new, because that is already storing it by reference with inside PHP 5. Okay, prior to that you could do it by reference, but the new word automatically provides the instantiated class by reference. Alright, so it's now putting that in there and saving it. So if it's not in there, it's updating this with inside of the database, alright, which is good. Now, so as we're going through now, self users has been updated, and it's going to return self users, okay, which is good. So now let's say, let's come to here and we can just abolish that because we don't want to run it twice. And if it's not, and if it is in there, we're not going to do anything with it basically. So let's come back to our index.php and let's just say model and then users. Alright, let's see what it does now. Ah, okay, sorry. There we go. Alright, because we have to go directly to the class itself. Let's come to here. Oh, did I make it private? I did, didn't I? Oh, I haven't saved it. Did I make it private? We're going to have to make it public, just for the sake of this example. Okay, and as you can see now, it's stored exactly the same thing, but we can now reference it directly using the class as a static property. So let's come back to here, and just to show you now that we can't access the private property here, gives us an error message saying cannot access private property. Alright, which is good, which is exactly what we want. We don't want people from outside of the class accessing this data. We want to only provide the information that we want to. Now, with inside of this, we're selecting it from the database. Now, I don't want to do this call unless we've had explicit confirmation from self users whether it's the array key exists. So if array key does not exist, once again, okay, the ID is what we're going to put in there, is what we're searching, and we come into here and we're going to say users. So if it doesn't exist, then we're going to say, well, you can continue and access the database, alright, which is good. Okay, else we're going to then extract the data from the users itself. Alright, so what we're going to do is say return. Right, okay, what we're going to do is say user equals self and users and then ID. Alright, we've already had explicit confirmation that it's in there by saying that the array key does exist. Now what we're going to do is we're going to return this by reference. Alright, okay, so let's go to return the user now. So let's come back to our index.php and let's now say get user, right, and 1. Alright, now print our user. Alright, okay, it still says users, but it's just one user now. Now, as you can see here, we've got user info is still returning the same user which we want. Okay, the interesting part about this now though is that if we go users and name, for example, it equals Frank, okay, well, let's put just for a bit of fun, Frankenstein, alright, name equals Frankenstein and users is here, alright. Now at the moment this is by reference, okay, which is all well and good. So it means that users here is now going to change, as you can see, Frankenstein. Now if we then was to take a new one and say David equals model and get user, as you can see now, and what we're going to do here is print our David. Alright, so let's just put a little bit of an indication here that this is actually David. Okay, so now you can see here that we've got name equals David and name equals Frankenstein. Alright, now what does this mean? This means that basically we've got the user here, but for some reason at the moment it's only updated this one users. Alright, but we returned it by reference. Well, that's because it returned it by reference, but this actually hasn't got it by reference. Okay, but now what we have to do is actually say explicitly on this side, I want whatever you're returning by reference. Okay, it returned it by reference, and now we need to basically say I want it by reference as well. So now as we change this and come back to Firefox, as you can see, the first time it said Frankenstein was on the first one because we changed it, but David was on the second one, although we actually collected the same data. Now let's refresh it and we're still getting Frankenstein. Oh, we're still getting David on this one. Why is that then? Let's have a quick look at this. What have I done wrong here? So get user, okay, did it the first call. Right, okay, the first time, yeah, look, see, the first time it never stored it in get users, or it never stored it in here. Alright, so what we've got to do is up here, is like this did it here, we need to come in and go, well, okay, add it please. Alright, so within inside of that we come to here and chuck that in there. now we can now say return self users and user ID itself, alright, which user ID is also wrong because we need to say ID there and ID there, like that. Alright, so now let's come back, and as you can see we've got Frankenstein and Frankenstein, and just because I did actually make a mistake there, let's remove that and see whether I was wrong on this. Now see, it worked already. Okay, I just made a boo-boo, that's all. Okay, that's 1 hour. We're getting there, alright. It's taking a lot longer than I planned, but I believe you're getting a lot more out of it than what I thought I was going to give you. Alright, you're learning a lot more now about the functionality of making a logical class-based, let's call it PHP application, right, rather than just writing some random script that removes a few things and does a few things. This is very, very logical, and if you want to fault find, you can find the script, the page, the class which you want first and say, okay, I know the issue is here. And you're storing things in memory, which means you're saving milliseconds and maybe nanoseconds of time and of also memory by reference and storing data statically and not instantiating new classes when you actually don't need to instantiate a new class, because that is storing extra info in the memory and taking more time, which is not needed. Okay, so for the next one, now that we can manage to extract the data from the database, we're actually ready to start making our user profile. Alright, so that's going to be in the next tutorial. Now, the next one's going to be a lot of just writing a bit of HTML, which I'm probably just going to split that down into a separate tutorial, just writing the HTML, because I'm sure you guys can write HTML very, very easily. Okay, anyway guys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it was beneficial. Right, as you can see, the key thing from this hour is that people make mistakes. People can't remember all the code. None of us are actually computers. We do need to reference things like PHP.net. We need to double check things. Everyone makes mistakes, but the more of an experienced developer you get, okay, the quicker you can find these errors. Alright, I only put the video offline for a couple of minutes at a time just to fault find. Okay, at no point did they go on for hours. They were just a couple of minutes just to find the smallest mistakes. If you go and ask any other developer and say, have you ever stood there and banged your head against a wall for hours, if not days, if not weeks, to find the smallest of errors? And I will put my hand up and say, yes, I have done. Okay, thanks very much, alright, for listening. Hopefully there should be another tutorial coming in the next 24 hours, if not 48 hours. Come and visit me at Facebook. It's facebook.com/Thorn Design. Otherwise, come and visit me personally at facebook.com/Thorn Web Design. Once again, thank you very much and have a nice evening. Good night.